What if your empathy, your ability to feel others so deeply, has become the veil that hides you from yourself? Carl Jung believed that our truest nature is not discovered through light alone, but through our descent into shadow, where the soul learns its own language. Today, we descend together into that forgotten place. There is a part of you that feels everything: the joy, the sorrow, the quiet ache of the world. You think this sensitivity is your gift, but perhaps it is also your prison, for within every empath lies a deeper mystery, a hidden self, calling from the depths of the unconscious, longing to be found. There comes a moment in every empath's life when they begin to wonder, who am I beneath all that I feel? You have spent years absorbing the emotions of others, wrapping your heart around their wounds, carrying their sorrow as if it were your duty to heal the world. You listen, you understand, you forgive, and in the process, a strange silence grows inside you. A silence where your own voice once lived. Carl Jung would call this silence the beginning of shadow work. For the empath, the greatest illusion is believing that compassion alone leads to truth. Yet, beneath that gentle exterior, beneath the kind eyes and soft heart, there lies another self. One that has been neglected, denied, and buried under the endless weight of others' feelings. This hidden self is not evil. It is not dangerous. It is simply unknown. And Jung reminds us that what we do not know within ourselves, we project outward, onto the people we try to save, onto the chaos we try to fix. You see, the empath's gift often begins as a wound. Somewhere in childhood, you learned that peace comes from keeping others calm, that love must be earned through care. So, you became a mirror for everyone else, reflecting their emotions, dimming your own. And like all mirrors, you forgot that the image you hold is not your own face. This is the mask, the persona, the self you built to survive in a world that demanded sensitivity, but punished self-expression. The persona smiles when it wants to scream. It says, "I'm fine," when the heart trembles. It gives comfort to others but denies itself rest. Jung described the persona as a necessary illusion, the social self that allows us to function. But when we mistake it for the whole truth of who we are, the soul begins to fracture. For behind every mask, the shadow waits. The shadow is not merely darkness. It is everything you have exiled in order to appear good, kind, spiritual, or strong. It is your anger when you pretend to be calm. It is your jealousy when you convince yourself you are above envy. It is your exhaustion when you tell the world you are happy to help. The empath's shadow is especially subtle. It hides behind generosity, behind understanding, behind the desperate need to be needed. But make no mistake, the shadow is alive. It whispers in dreams, it leaks through fatigue, it shows itself in the quiet resentment that follows self-sacrifice. Jung believed that the first step toward wholeness is to bring this shadow into awareness, to look directly at what you have denied. Yet this is where most empaths falter, for they fear that seeing their shadow will make them unkind. They think that anger, boundaries, and self-focus are signs of coldness. But the truth is far more mysterious. To deny your darkness is to live half a life. To wear a mask so tight it eventually becomes your skin. The empath who refuses their shadow becomes hollow, endlessly pouring energy into others, but never receiving their own light in return. Imagine the shadow as a forgotten twin, the one who took on all the emotions you refused to feel. Every time you said yes when you meant no, the twin absorbed your anger. Every time you forgave too quickly, the twin held your unspoken pain. And every time you offered love while feeling empty, the twin carried the weight of your despair. This twin walks beside you still, waiting for acknowledgement, not to destroy you, but to remind you of your completeness. In the language of Jungian psychology, this confrontation with the shadow is a sacred descent, an initiation into the deeper layers of the psyche. It is not about rejecting empathy, but transforming it. When you face your shadow, you begin to understand that compassion without boundaries is not virtue. It is self-erasure. Real empathy does not drown in others' suffering. It stands firm enough to witness without losing itself. Ask yourself now, how many times have you mistaken emotional merging for love? How often have you rescued others while abandoning yourself? The mask of the empath becomes dangerous when it replaces authenticity with performance. You are not meant to be endlessly open. You are meant to be whole, capable of love, but also of anger, capable of peace, but also of defiance. Jung wrote, "The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego, personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort." For the empath, that effort is doubled, because your goodness has been your armor for so long. When you begin to glimpse your shadow, you may feel guilt, confusion, even shame. You may ask, how can I, someone so kind, harbor such feelings? But those feelings are not signs of failure. They are signs of life. They are the parts of you that were never allowed to breathe. Every empath carries a secret anger, not at others, but at themselves, for always giving more than they receive. That anger, when acknowledged, becomes sacred fuel. It becomes the energy needed to reclaim your boundaries, your desires, your truth. You will begin to notice how the world reflects this process. People who once drained you begin to reveal your old patterns. Situations that once demanded your silence now provoke your voice. The shadow does not disappear. It integrates. And as it does, your empathy becomes cleaner, wiser. You no longer absorb others' pain unconsciously. You witness it with awareness, deciding when to engage and when to step back. The mask slips away, and for the first time, you feel the air of authenticity against your face. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The empath's fate has always been to serve others. But the conscious empath knows there is another destiny, to serve truth, to meet oneself in the mirror of the world, not as a reflection of others, but as a being of depth, complexity, and contradiction. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the keeper of your lost power. When you allow yourself to see it, truly see it, something extraordinary happens. The light that once came only from helping others begins to burn within you. It is not a gentle light, but a fierce one. A flame that says, "I exist beyond my empathy. I am whole." The mask begins to crack. The persona, once perfect and polished, starts to crumble under the weight of honesty. And beneath it, the face of your true self slowly emerges, neither entirely light nor entirely dark, but entirely real. There is a path hidden within every human soul, an invisible trail winding through dreams, memories, and forgotten desires. Carl Jung called this path the journey of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are beneath the layers of conditioning, fear, and expectation. For the empathic soul, this journey is not just psychological, it is sacred. It is the slow awakening from the trance of living for others into the revelation of living as oneself. At first, this path does not look like a journey at all. It begins quietly, often in moments of confusion or emotional exhaustion. The empath, who once found purpose in healing others, begins to sense an emptiness that no amount of giving can fill. You might call it burnout, but Jung would call it the whisper of the self, the inner center of the psyche that longs for wholeness. It is as if something ancient within you is saying, "Enough. Now, come home to yourself." The journey of individuation begins with this calling, a soft but relentless pull from within. It asks you to descend into your own depths, to leave behind the surface identity that has kept you safe. For the empath, this can feel like betrayal. After all, you have spent your life being the caretaker, the listener, the light in dark places. To turn inward feels selfish, even dangerous. But Jung would tell you only by turning inward can you discover the source of your empathy. The well has run dry because you have never seen where its water truly flows from. In Jung's map of the soul, the first step toward individuation is confrontation with the unconscious. the vast ocean beneath the small island of your conscious mind. It is here that your dreams begin to speak more vividly, your emotions grow more unpredictable, and symbols from the depths rise to the surface. You may dream of losing your way in forests, of mirrors that show unfamiliar faces, of drowning and awakening. These are not random images, they are messages from the self, guiding you toward integration. The unconscious does not speak in words, it speaks in symbols, and each symbol is an invitation to meet a forgotten part of yourself. You might notice, too, that your relationships begin to shift. The people who once defined you, those you rescued, comforted, and absorbed, no longer seem to fit the same way. This can be painful, but it is a necessary unraveling. Individuation demands that the empath step out of the web of emotional entanglement and face the raw truth of selfhood. You begin to realize that empathy without boundaries has kept you trapped in patterns of dependence. Now, the task is to transform empathy into understanding, to feel deeply, but to stay centered within your own being. Jung often spoke of integration, the act of bringing the unconscious into the light of awareness. But integration is not an intellectual process, it is alchemical. It burns. It melts down the structures of your old identity so that something new can take shape. The empath, used to dissolving into others, must now learn to hold their own form. It feels uncomfortable, even lonely. You begin to see how much of your compassion was a shield against your own pain. And as the mask falls away, you meet the raw, unfiltered self, not perfect, not pure, but profoundly alive. There are moments in this journey that feel like death. Jung called this the nigredo, the black stage of transformation, where the soul descends into confusion and darkness. You may feel lost, unsure of who you are without your roles. But this darkness is not punishment, it is initiation. The empath's tears are the baptism of rebirth. You are dissolving the false self so that the true one may emerge. In this descent, dreams become your compass. Pay attention to the recurring symbols, the lost child, the locked door, the distant star. Each carries the energy of what Jung called archetypes, the universal patterns of human experience. The archetype of the child calls you to reclaim innocence. The door symbolizes the threshold to your next stage of growth. The star reminds you that even in darkness, your direction is written within. As you move deeper, the figures in your inner world begin to change. The shadow you once feared now stands beside you, not as an enemy, but as an ally. You see that your anger, your fear, your desire for solitude, all were parts of you waiting to be recognized. Jung believed that individuation was not about perfection, but about wholeness. The goal is not to become good, but to become real, to accept your contradictions, your flaws, your complexity, and to see in them the blueprint of your divine design. Then comes the meeting with what Jung called the anima or animus, the inner opposite. If you are gentle, you will find within yourself a strength you never knew existed. If you are logical, you will encounter your hidden emotion. This meeting unites the dual forces of your nature, allowing your soul to balance and expand. For the empath, this is crucial, to embrace not only the heart that feels, but the will that acts. Slowly, you begin to sense something emerging, a deeper rhythm, an inner authority that feels ancient yet intimately yours. This is the voice of the self. It does not shout, it resonates. It speaks in intuition, in synchronicity, in a quiet certainty that you are on your path even when you cannot see the way. The self is not an idea, it is an experience. It is the moment you realize that the same light you sought in others has always burned within you. Jung described individuation as the reconciliation of opposites, the union of the conscious and unconscious, the human and divine, the shadow and light. For the empath, this union is the transformation of sensitivity into power. You no longer lose yourself in the emotions of others. Instead, you witness them with compassion, anchored in your own center. Your empathy becomes discerning, wise, and luminous. You feel the suffering of the world, but you are not consumed by it. You have learned the sacred art of being both open and whole. And so, the journey of individuation continues, not as a straight path but as a spiral, each turn bringing you deeper into yourself. What once felt like sensitivity now feels like awareness. What once felt like burden now feels like purpose. The empath who once sought identity in reflection now walks with clarity, guided not by others' pain, but by the light of their own soul. There is a story older than memory, older than language, a myth that lives within every soul that has ever known the pain of others as their own. It is the story of the wounded healer. In ancient lore, it was Chiron, the immortal centaur struck by a poisoned arrow, who could heal all wounds but his own. In Jungian psychology, this myth is more than a tale. It is an archetype, a pattern written deep within the empathic heart. It is the symbol of every person who has turned their suffering into a source of compassion, who has made healing their purpose because pain has been their teacher. For the empath, this archetype lives and breathes within the unconscious. It guides their every instinct to help, to comfort, to fix, but it also traps them in an endless cycle of giving. Jung would say that when an archetype dominates consciousness, it takes possession of the personality. And when the archetype of the healer possesses the empath, it demands sacrifice. You become the caretaker, the listener, the one who absorbs everyone's darkness, yet refuses to face your own. This is the paradox of the empathic soul. You understand wounds because you carry them. You recognize pain in others because you have walked through it yourself. Somewhere in your history, perhaps in childhood, you learned that love was conditional, that safety depended on keeping others well. So you became intuitive, attuned, able to sense the unspoken. You learned to anticipate others' needs before they spoke them. You became the emotional guardian, and in doing so, you lost touch with your own inner child, the one who longed to be held instead of holding everyone else. Jung would tell you that this compulsion to heal is both divine and dangerous. The divine part is your gift, your capacity to enter another's world without judgment, to feel their sorrow and still offer light. But the danger lies in the unconscious wound that drives it, the unhealed pain that whispers, "If I can fix them, maybe I can fix myself." This is the hidden core of the wounded healer. Healing others becomes a way of avoiding your own descent. You touch everyone's shadow but your own. The archetype of the healer, when unbalanced, leads to martyrdom. You become addicted to pain, drawn to the broken, the lost, the emotionally unavailable. It feels like purpose, but it is actually repetition, a psychological pattern replaying the original wound. You attract those who mirror the part of you that still believes you must earn love through suffering. And every time you save someone, you feed the archetype, strengthening the illusion that your worth depends on your usefulness. Yet Jung's wisdom offers a deeper truth. The wound itself is the doorway to transformation. What you call weakness may be the seed of your individuation. The pain you carry is not a curse, but a guide, the shadowed teacher that leads you back to the self. To truly embody the archetype of the healer, you must first become the patient. You must sit with your own wounds, not as a victim, but as an observer of their meaning. Every scar has a story, and that story holds your medicine. The first step is to recognize that your empathy, though sacred, has been shaped by survival. You learn to read emotions as a form of protection, to sense danger before it arrived, to make peace before conflict erupted. But this sensitivity left unexamined becomes self-erasure. Jung spoke of the necessity of confronting the complexes, those clusters of emotion and memory buried in the unconscious that control our behavior. The empath's healer complex says, "I must be the light." But the truth is, the world does not need your light if it costs you your own flame. As you begin to turn inward, something remarkable happens. The healer archetype starts to evolve. It shifts from the savior to the alchemist. You no longer heal to avoid your pain. You heal because you have learned from it. you realize that true healing is not about fixing. It is about witnessing. You can sit with another's suffering without drowning in it because you have faced your own depths. Compassion becomes clearer, wiser, cleaner. It no longer demands your self-destruction. In Jungian terms, this transformation is the movement from unconscious identification with the archetype to conscious integration of it. You are no longer possessed by the healer. You embody it. You understand that healing is not an act of power, but of presence. You do not give from emptiness, you give from fullness. You do not rescue, you remind others of their capacity to rise. The wound remains, but it becomes luminous, a scar that glows with understanding instead of pain. As this awareness grows, you begin to notice that your relationships change. The people who once relied on your endless compassion may fall away. Those who only came to feed on your energy will no longer find you available. This is not cruelty, it is balance. Jung called this the emergence of the self, the center that holds the opposites in harmony. You are both healer and wounded, both light and dark. The empath learns that to heal is not to give endlessly, but to circulate energy, to let it flow in and out like breath. The archetype of the healer also has a higher purpose. It reminds humanity of the sacred truth that pain and meaning are intertwined. The empath who integrates this archetype becomes a vessel of wisdom, someone who can walk into the sorrow of the world without losing their way. They carry light not as a weapon, but as a lantern, illuminating the path for others who wander in darkness. And that light is steady because it is rooted in understanding, not obligation. Every wound you have carried, every heartbreak, every sleepless night of absorbing others' pain, they were not in vain. They were initiation. The universe was not punishing you. It was shaping you into an instrument of awareness. You were learning, in the language of experience, that empathy without self-awareness is self-destruction. But empathy anchored in self-knowledge is transcendence. Jung once wrote, "Only the wounded physician heals." He meant that it is through our own suffering that we gain the insight to heal others authentically. The empath who embraces their wound becomes whole, because they no longer hide from the darkness within. They understand that healing is not the absence of pain, but the integration of it. The archetype of the healer is not about curing the world. It is about awakening to the divine pattern that every wound contains. The healer's path is not outward, but inward, a journey through the labyrinth of the soul, where every scar becomes a constellation mapping the way back to wholeness. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine your inner world not as chaos, but as a vast, living landscape, mountains of memory, rivers of emotion, forests of forgotten dreams. Beneath every thought and feeling lies an invisible structure, a hidden order that Carl Jung called the map of the soul. It is not a map drawn with ink, but one shaped by archetypes, symbols, and the eternal dance between the conscious and the unconscious. To walk this map is to understand the true architecture of your being. And for the empathic soul, this journey is both revelation and release. In Jung's vision, the human psyche is like a kingdom divided into realms. The conscious mind is the surface, the daylight world of reason, responsibility, and identity. This is where the ego resides, the small but essential navigator of your waking life. The ego says, "I am," yet it is only one island in a vast sea. Beneath it lies the unconscious, the infinite expanse where your forgotten memories, instincts, fears, and dreams reside. It is the hidden territory that shapes your reality from the shadows. And at the very center of it all lies the self, the totality of who you are, the unifying force that connects all opposites. The self is not the ego's creation, it is the ego's origin. It is the divine spark within you, timeless and whole, waiting to be realized. For the empath, this map often begins in disarray. The boundaries between the conscious and unconscious blur. Feelings flow like uncontrolled rivers, emotions of others mingling with your own. You may sense things before they are spoken, feel energies that others ignore, and carry burdens that were never yours to bear. You live close to the threshold of the unconscious, but without a compass. Jung's map becomes that compass, showing you how to navigate this inner territory without losing yourself in its depths. The first realm you must understand is the persona, the mask you wear before the world. It is the version of yourself that smiles, adapts, conforms, and protects you from rejection. For the empath, the persona is often made of kindness. It says, "I am the good one, the helper, the understanding soul." But this mask, however noble, can become a prison if worn too long. When you identify too deeply with it, you lose touch with the raw, unfiltered parts of your nature. Your anger, your desire, your independence. Jung warned that the persona is necessary but dangerous. It allows you to function in society, but if mistaken for your whole self, it hides your truth behind its gentle surface. Behind this mask lies the shadow, the place where all the rejected parts of you live. For the empath, the shadow holds the emotions you have forbidden yourself to feel: resentment, envy, rage, exhaustion. These emotions, denied and buried, begin to manifest as fatigue, anxiety, or relationships that mirror your hidden pain. The shadow is not evil. It is simply everything you have not yet accepted. Jung taught that to walk the map of the soul, you must confront your shadow and make peace with it. The moment you stop running from it, it transforms from darkness into energy. It becomes your power source, your authenticity, your truth. As you continue your journey, you encounter the inner counterpart, the anima or animus. These are the archetypal images of the inner feminine and inner masculine that dwell within every person. The anima represents feeling, intuition, and receptivity. The animus represents reason, structure, and action. For many empaths, the anima is overdeveloped. They are deeply in touch with emotion and intuition, but often lack boundaries and strength. The journey of the soul calls for balance. To integrate the animus is to claim your authority, to learn that compassion without will is fragility, and strength without empathy is emptiness. The union of these forces within you births inner harmony, what Jung called the sacred marriage, the konjunktio. Every dream, every conflict, every emotional storm is a message from the unconscious, trying to lead you toward this union. Jung believed the unconscious was not chaos, but intelligence, a living field that communicates through symbols. When you dream of doors, it is the psyche inviting you to open new thresholds. When you see water, it speaks of emotion and transformation. When an animal appears, it embodies an instinct waiting to be reclaimed. The map of the soul is written in this symbolic language. The more you learn to interpret it, the more clearly you begin to see how every event in your life mirrors something unfolding within. And then, at the heart of this map, lies the self, not the self of personality, but the self of wholeness. It is the center that holds all contradictions, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, conscious and unconscious. Jung described it as both the goal and the origin of psychological development. You do not become the self. You realize that you have always been it. Every fragment of your being, every wound, every lost memory, is drawn toward this center like planets around a sun. The process of individuation, the unfolding of your full potential, is nothing more than the ego learning to align with the self. For the empath, reaching this realization changes everything. You no longer feel the need to dissolve into others' emotions, because you understand that empathy is not fusion. It is connection from wholeness. You begin to sense that the energy you once scattered outward must now circulate inward. You find the still point within yourself that feels both human and eternal. And in that stillness, you recognize that the suffering of others mirrors your own, not to drown you, but to awaken you. As you continue through the map, you realize that life itself is an initiation. Every heartbreak is an invitation to deeper knowing. Every moment of exhaustion calls you back to balance. Every encounter, every emotion, every dream is a symbol, a guidepost pointing you toward the self. The empath, once lost in the tides of feeling, begins to see the ocean as sacred order. Nothing is random. Every ripple of emotion has purpose. The unconscious is no longer an abyss. It is the language of the soul. To follow this map requires courage. It asks you to lose the certainty of who you think you are in order to discover who you truly are. It asks you to meet both your darkness and your divinity without turning away. It asks you to trust that even the chaos has a pattern, even the suffering has meaning. And as you walk it, step by step, symbol by symbol, you begin to glimpse the vast symmetry of your inner world, where every shadow hides light and every light casts a shadow, both woven into the same eternal design. And now, imagine standing at the center of your own soul, the landscape of your being fully revealed. You have walked through masks that once defined you, faced the shadow that once haunted you, embraced the wounds that once consumed you, and traced the sacred map that guides you toward wholeness. You have journeyed through the unconscious, through the archetypes that shape your destiny, and you have touched the eternal pulse of the self that beats quietly beneath every thought, every emotion, every action. Carl Jung teaches us that the true self is not found in the applause of others, nor in the endless giving that empties the heart. It is found in the courage to turn inward, to witness, to integrate, to claim the entirety of your being. The light, the dark, the broken, the radiant. It is the realization that the empathy you once thought was your burden is actually the key to your liberation. Because when anchored in wholeness, your sensitivity becomes a force of clarity and wisdom. The empath who seeks the true self learns the most profound truth of all, that the journey is not about escaping the world, nor about vanishing into others' pain. It is about walking with your shadow and your light, dancing with your inner healer and your inner child, listening to the whisper of dreams and the pull of symbols until you know without question that every piece of your being, every wound, every joy, every longing, belongs to the magnificent, indivisible mosaic that is you. And as you stand there, at the threshold of your own consciousness, you realize that the self has never been somewhere out there to find. It has been waiting within you all along, patient, luminous, eternal. The question now is not whether you can reach it, but whether you will dare to live from it, to let it guide every thought, every feeling, every choice, until your life itself becomes the reflection of the soul you have rediscovered. In this awakening, the empath transforms. You no longer simply feel the world. You witness it, you understand it, and you carry your truth like a steady flame. The journey of individuation continues, always unfolding, always deeper, always calling you to remember, the self is not a destination. It is the hidden river beneath every mask, every shadow, every act of compassion. And if you listen closely, if you dare to go inward, you will hear it, the eternal whisper of who you were always meant to be.